Hey everybody, I just wanted to comment really quickly on this whole recent kerfluffle, for one of a less cheesy term, between former Love and Hip Hop Atlanta star K. Michelle and one of her best friends, Jonathan Fernandez. Those of you who follow these things already know what happened between them. K. Michelle had some kind of medical crisis because of, I think, injections of silicone directly into her behind over the years to have a bigger booty and everything that comes with that.
I've always been curvy. It wasn't enough. I'm having trouble with men right now. Maybe if I had a huge butt, I'd get even bigger love.
If I'm not mistaken, it was even a life-threatening occurrence. She posted an Instagram post while she was in there talking about how certain people she knew hadn't really had her back. People she'd known for a long time, people she said she had given her last or whatever. She said that they didn't really have her back, they weren't really there for her. She listed a number of people who did have her back, including the love of my life, Love and Hip Hop Hollywood's Moniece Slaughter. But conspicuous by its absence from that list was the name of her friend, Jonathan Fernandez. And so apparently one of her friends commented on the post saying Jonathan wasn't there. And to be honest, at that stage of the whole thing, that was my question too. Because Jonathan in the past has really been like K. Michelle's sidekick, particularly on her show, K. Michelle, My Life. There was even a tear-jerking scene they had together on that show where Jonathan poured his heart out to K. Michelle, showering her with thanks and praise, talking about how she had put him on.
You mean the whole entire world to me, and I want you to know why. As soon as you got your record deal, you called me. And you said, I need you by my side. As soon as you got your own label, Jonathan, you're a part of this. Let me incorporate you. You have found a way to build me up, Kay, that nobody in my life ever has.
Oh, Jonathan.
From the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you for every single thing you've ever done for me.
He really made it sound like he basically owed her a big chunk of his career and his success, if not his entire career.
Kay, I don't even have a GED.
Well, apparently, although I think he at one point did find out she was in the hospital and reach out to her via phone, he cut that conversation short, said he would call her back. He had to run, but he would call her back, and then apparently didn't call her back, and she was in her feelings and felt some type of way about that. So in response to the commenter's question on the gram, she put him on blast. But a lot of people had serious problems with her reaction, and then Jonathan more recently put her on blast, explaining his position and talking about how he had his own issues going on in his life. I think his half-brother had a crisis where his half-brother's father died and his half-brother was really distraught and he felt he and his family had to really be there for his brother, etc. I just wanted to comment on this because in response to that, I hear a lot of people totally taking Jonathan's side and blasting K. Michelle and saying she needs to get over herself, the world doesn't revolve around her, it's not all about her. One thing that my favorite YouTuber, Lovely T, said at one point was,
So my thing is, don't nobody owe you nothing. Appreciate the people who were there and who came to spend time with you, but there's no reason to throw shade at the folks who weren't there because they might have their reasons for not coming to see you.
Honestly, I actually disagree. And this is something I've expressed in response to those folks. And this is something on which I have some very strong feelings, okay? Because I've been through a medical crisis the past few years of my life. Those of you who watch my YouTube channel should already know a thing or two about it. My knee injury, the fact that I had to get this knee totally replaced. That's my entire range of motion because of scar tissue that resulted from internal bleeding, massive internal bleeding into my knee joint that just caused a bunch of scar tissue to build up and robbed me of my range of motion, required me to get my knee replaced, and put me in daily chronic pain for which I'm still dependent on opioid painkillers. Because of this, I lost my job where I was living in Washington, D.C. I lost my U.S. work permit. I had to come back to Canada, here to Montreal, and move back in with family, and it's been really rough, and I haven't fully recovered from it even to this day. In that time, a number of close friends of mine had my back, and a number of other close friends of mine did not. Some of them whose backs I had had in the past, the recent past at that. People who would call me and pour their hearts out to me, spill their guts about their problems. One of them was going through a divorce at one point. I was her sounding board, even at a time when I had my own stuff to go through because I had just gotten out of the damn hospital after my first disastrous botched knee surgery. I was busy. I was in physical pain. I was suffering side effects from the painkillers. I was tired. I was on disability leave from work, being paid only 60% of my already modest nonprofit salary, living in an expensive city like Washington, D.C. I didn't have any family in the immediate vicinity. I had a brother in Philly. I had an uncle in Maryland, but neither of them lived that close to me, and so they weren't able to visit me that often. All I had around me were friends, and a lot of the time, my friends, my roommates, and so on were out of the house, and so I was alone all day by myself, in pain, and trying to struggle through this. And even then, certain friends would reach out to me to spill their guts to me and unburden themselves about their problems with me. Did I just ignore them? No. Did I say, well, we all got our own problems and I got mine, and God knows I did have my own problems and I still do to this day. But did I abandon those friends? No. but later on they abandoned me. And honestly, I felt some type of way about it, and I still do. And that brings me to the central issue. This whole idea a lot of people have nowadays that nobody owes you shit. I don't buy it. I have to push back against that. Now, I'm not saying everyone owes you the whole world, but I do think that what you owe people and what people owe you really depends on the nature of the relationship that you have with those people. If it's just a casual acquaintance or a casual friend, you don't owe those people very much. But if you're talking about a ride or die friend, like Jonathan and K. Michelle was supposed to be, because according to him, he basically owed her, if not his whole career, then a big chunk of it.
I want her to sit here and listen to how grateful I am for all the opportunities that she's presented to me.
If you're talking about a ride or die friend, someone who's put you on like that, I think you do owe them certain things, quite frankly, unless the nature of the relationship has changed. I honestly think you do owe it to that person. When they're going through a medical crisis like that kind of predicament, especially if it's life-threatening, you do owe them certain things. Now, I'm not saying that if you're in the hospital, your friends have to come and visit you in person. Hospitals are not pleasant or healthy places to be. No one knows that better than I do. I have lost a number of relatives and loved ones of mine over the years, including my father when I was only 16 years old. I know how unpleasant it can be to be in hospitals, whether as a patient or someone visiting a patient. I don't insist that people visit me in the hospital when I'm ill or injured, but I would expect that if you're a close friend of mine, you should at least keep in touch with me while I'm in there, just to keep me company, just to take my mind off the things that I'm going through. Via phone, whether it's my cell phone or the phone in my hospital room, whether it's FaceTime, whether it's Skype, Google Hangouts, Zoom, whether it's just chatting with me on Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp or whatever. I need support to get through this. I can't get through this on my own. In fact, before my last knee surgery, which was a total knee replacement surgery right here in Montreal just over 2 years ago, I was so apprehensive about how it might turn out because of the excruciatingly painful complications that I suffered in the wake of the previous 3 knee surgeries that I had had in the space of less than 6 months, a year earlier while I was still in DC, that I actually posted a Facebook status in which I practically begged my Facebook friends to have my back while I was in there. Most of them were in the States, they couldn't visit in person, but I asked them. Some friends responded to me, some didn't. And I remember the ones who didn't. And I make no apologies for it. I make a list, I check it twice. I keep track of who's naughty and who's nice. When I'm good to people and I have their backs, especially if they're not related to me, so I don't have like a biological obligation to have their backs, I expect some damn consideration in return. And again, I make no apologies for that. I think people do have certain obligations to each other in these situations. Now, Jonathan didn't have to visit K. Michelle in the hospital in person, but the least he could have done was reach out to her and converse with her at least a couple times while she was in there just to keep her spirits up. And if he couldn't do that, whether it was because he had to work or because of his brother's crisis, all he had to do was send her one measly text message. He didn't even have to talk to her on the phone if he didn't want to. Send her one measly text message to let her know, hey, I'm not abandoning you, sis, but I've got my own crisis going on. Here's why you're not hearing more from me. I wish I could be there for you more, but I do have other obligations as well.
Communicate!
I don't know that much about K. Michelle. From what little I do know of her, she seems pretty high strung. Maybe that wouldn't have been good enough for her, but if so, then I would have been willing to jump on this screw K. Michelle, get over yourself bandwagon. But from what I understand, Jonathan didn't really make that clear to her until he put out his message responding to her call out, putting her on blast. All he had to do was let her know that that was the reason she wasn't hearing more from him.
Communicate!
At the end of the day, you yourself have said in the past that she put you on.
You have found a way to build me up, Kay, that nobody in my life ever has.
By telling her that, by giving her that whole tear-jerking, blubbering tribute on her show, you probably created in her mind an expectation that you would be a real ride-or-die friend and have her back in her time of need.
That's the only friend who has never done nothing to me. And I need to thank him for showing me that good people and friendship exist.
No wonder she reacted this way when you couldn't be bothered to give her more than a brief, measly, abbreviated phone conversation. And at the end of it, you told her you'd call her back and you didn't. No wonder she felt abandoned. I don't blame her, to be perfectly honest with you. And I honestly think that this attitude that people don't owe each other things is just so obnoxious. The same friend I was talking about earlier, who was going through a divorce when I was in and out of the hospital, one of the things she did say to me in one of the last messages she bothered to send me was that people don't owe each other anything. She wasn't explicitly referring directly to our situation, but it seemed clear that she had that in mind. Same bullshit. This whole attitude that people feel like they don't have obligations to anyone, or maybe anyone outside of their biological families or whatever, I think it's a really negative development in society. I think it's having a corrosive effect on our society. I'm hearing reports and social science research that shows people in American society are increasingly isolated and lonely. It's leading some people to have problems with depression and other mental illnesses, and with all the stress that comes with life nowadays, people need a support system. And sometimes family isn't enough, sometimes they don't get along enough with their families, sometimes their families aren't able to be there for them as much as they'd like for any number of circumstantial reasons. In those situations, you need friends as well as family. Why is it so much to ask that your friends have your back to some degree, or at the very least, let you know why they can't have your back in a particular situation? One of my other close friends in DC, while I was going through all that, I only laid eyes on her twice in the entire year 2014. She didn't come to visit me in the hospital at all while I was in and out of the hospital with my knee problems. But I never held it against her. You know why? Because at one point, she messaged me to let me know, sorry you haven't seen me while you were in the hospital. There's a specific reason for it. The reason is I lost my ex-boyfriend to cancer when he was only 37 years old a couple of years ago, and I have really painful memories of visiting him in the hospital and watching him deteriorate and eventually die. Because of that experience, I don't like to visit people in hospitals. It's nothing personal. I said, damn, I heard about your boyfriend, but I didn't know it had that effect on you. My heart goes out to you. You have my sympathy, and don't worry about you not visiting me in the hospital. It's all good. I appreciate you for letting me know. Once I was out, she had my back in other ways. She took me out to lunch before I had to leave DC. She attended the farewell party that I threw right before I left DC just over 3 years ago. So the way I see it, if you are close friends with someone, you do owe it to them to do whatever little you can to help them out in those situations. I'm not unrealistic and I'm not unreasonable. I don't expect people to drop everything they're doing and wait on me hand and foot when I'm having a rough time. But it would be nice if you could just not ignore me, not treat me like I don't exist, not treat me like I don't matter when you know damn well I'm going through one of the darkest periods of my life.
Communicate!
And if you really can't be bothered to do that, then that just raises some serious questions about the fundamentals of our rapport, of our friendship. Why are we even friends in the first place? How do you even really feel about me? Do you actually give a damn about me at all? I could be going through something like that, or K. Michelle could be going something like what she went through, and no one owes her anything? Well, why the hell are you friends with her in the first place then? That's the way I look at it. I can't stress enough how important it is for people to understand the nuances of my position here. I'm not asking for the sun, the moon, and the stars. I'm not asking you to marry me. I'm not asking you to have me stand godfather to your children. I'm not asking you to give me any money or pay off my debts, my credit card debt, my student loan debt, or anything like that. I'm not asking you to pay my rent or my mortgage. I'm not asking you to have my children or anything like that. I'm not asking you to give me your whole life. Just don't ignore me. Don't totally abandon me when I'm in my hour of need. You don't even have to come visit me in the hospital if I'm sick or injured, but is it really so much to ask that you give me a call every now and then just to say what's up? You can't even reach out to me to let you know why you can't be there for me? That's really asking so much? Sorry, I don't agree. So honestly, I think that people need to check themselves on this whole issue. I think this whole attitude that no one owes anyone else anything is selfish, inconsiderate, and ultimately corrosive to society's social fabric. There's a big problem with people being lonely and isolated nowadays, and that kind of attitude can only contribute to it. If you don't feel like you owe even your close friends anything at all, then clearly you don't believe that you owe strangers anything, but sometimes you need to show compassion, even to strangers. Sometimes you need to show kindness. And if you can't, and you're talking about not a stranger, but a close ride or die friend of yours, damn, the least you could do is let them know why you're not there, why you can't have their backs. If you really have a legitimate reason, then you shouldn't be afraid to share that with that person. Jonathan Fernandez should have told K. Michelle, my brother's going through it right now. I need to have his back. That's why you're not hearing from me. That's all he had to do.
Communicate!
If he had done that much, K. Michelle might have been cool. If she weren't cool, then I would have been Team Jonathan and jumped on the bandwagon and said K. Michelle needs to get over herself. Or she needs to be more understanding, at any rate. But under these circumstances, sorry. People need to have each other's backs better than they do. This attitude that nobody owes anybody anything can only make that more difficult. Look out for each other, folks. Like Jerry Springer likes to say, be good to yourselves and each other.